Hello. Today's episode number 14 of the Professor Slots podcast discusses how state gaming regulations are a fact of life for slot machine players as well as other law-abiding casino gamblers, plus slot machine casino gambling in the U.S. territory of Guam. Thank you for joining me for the Professor Slots podcast show. I'm John Friedel, and this is the podcast about slot machine casino gambling. It is where I provide the knowledge, insights, and tools for helping you improve your slot machine gambling performance. Show notes are available within most podcast apps or at professorslots.com/E14.
John Friedel from the Professor Slots blog reveals all his tips and tricks for thriving in the casino environment. Choose winning slot machines and identify your gambling goals. Being entertained, earning comps, winning take-home cash, or combining them. John has won 90 taxable jackpots and a luxury car in 9 months of slot play and made a profit at slots gambling since 2013.
Remember to visit professorslots.com/subscribe to get your free report revealing the top 7 online resources for improving your gambling performance, including the one I've used as a top-tier slot machine casino gambler. Let's get started with the first segment of the show, state gaming regulations. For slot machine players, as well as other law-abiding gamblers, state gaming regulations are a simple fact of life, whether known to exist to most people or not. State-run gaming commissions work hard, and in fact make it their mission, to ensure the protection of private citizens from the dangers of gambling. But what do state gaming regulations mean for you? What do they mean to gaming companies and casino operators? This segment provides a perspective of how the gaming industry, both providers such as slot machine manufacturers and casino operators, as well as casino patrons such as slot enthusiasts, can be impacted by state legislation with regards to gaming regulations. The gaming and betting industry is highly regulated. Here, gaming refers to gambling activities, not the often youthful activity of video games per se. The word gaming can simply have one of 2 possible definitions. 1, the action or practice of playing gambling games, and 2, the action or practice of playing video games. As it happens, many people are generally only aware of the second definition. Going forward, I'll be referring to gaming as defined as gambling games rather than video games, as much as I personally enjoy video games. To wit, the popularity and acceptance of gaming is influenced by prevailing social mores, and changes to these social mores can result in a reduced acceptance of gaming as a leisure activity. Gaming companies and casino operators depend on the appeal of its gaming offerings to its customers and players and the general acceptance of gaming. Negative perceptions and publicity surrounding the gaming industry could lead to increased gaming regulation. If the popularity of gaming declines for any reason, the financial condition and results of operations for gaming companies and casino operators may be adversely affected. For example, if a perception develops that the gaming industry is failing to adequately address concerns over problem gambling, the resulting political pressure may result in the gaming industry being subjected to increased regulation. Such an increase in regulation could adversely impact results of operations and financial condition of gaming companies, as well as casino operators. Typically, gaming regulations in the jurisdiction in which gaming companies operate are established by legal statute or legislation. Gaming regulations are administered by a regulatory agency with broad authority to interpret gaming regulations and to regulate gaming activities. In the U.S., these jurisdictions are typically individual U.S. states, territories, or our single federal district. Each state-run regulatory agency is established by the state legislature. The establishment of this state agency, often called a state gaming commission or state control board, are often accompanied by a statewide vote if such action is called for within a specific state's constitution. Gaming is regulated by state law in the United States, which typically prohibits gaming except as authorized and regulated by the particular state. There are currently 45 jurisdictions which authorize the operation of gambling establishments in the United States. Several more state-run agencies exist only to operate and license state-run lottery systems in states that otherwise prohibit gambling establishments. Regulatory requirements vary widely among the state jurisdictions, but the majority of jurisdictions require licenses, permits, or findings of suitability for each gaming company. In some jurisdictions, major stockholders, directors, officers, and key employees are subject to lengthy background investigations that may require extensive personal and financial disclosures. Among other things, gaming authorities in the various jurisdictions in which gaming companies are licensed may 1. Adopt additional rules and regulations under the implementing statutes, 2. Investigate violations of gaming regulations, 3. Enforce gaming regulations and impose disciplinary sanctions for violations of such laws, including fines, penalties, and revocation of gaming licenses. 4. Review the character and fitness of manufacturers, distributors, and operators of gaming products and services, and make determinations regarding their suitability or qualification for licensure. 5. Grant licenses for the manufacture, distribution, and operation of gaming products and services. 6. Review and approve transactions, such as acquisitions, material commercial transactions, securities offerings, and debt transactions. And 7. Establish and collect related fees and/or taxes. Let's take a moment to discuss jurisdiction responsibility number 5. Grant licenses for the manufacture, distribution, and operation of gaming productions and services. It's worth mentioning that the regulatory review process and licensing requirements may limit the use of technologies owned and developed by those unwilling to subject themselves to regulatory review or do not meet regulatory requirements. Often, casino operators need to obtain approval within their jurisdiction to use new product hardware, software, and online gaming products. Gaming hardware and software must be approved either by a gaming authority laboratory or a private laboratory authorized by the gaming authority. Such approvals may require a license from the jurisdiction, which may place a limit on the amount of space allocated or limit the amount of new product to be made available. Substantial changes in any such regulations can also adversely affect demand. In summary, state gaming regulations are a simple fact of life, whether known to exist to most people or not. Gaming commissions work hard to ensure the protection of private citizens from the perceived dangers of gambling. Each state's gaming commission is slightly different, although many model themselves after the gaming laws of the U.S. state of Nevada. Because state gaming commissions are non-identical, on June 1, 2017, I started a weekly blog covering what each U.S. state, U.S. territory, and U.S. federal district offers players within their state gaming jurisdictions. As of this morning, December 28, 2017, I've completed 31 reports with the release of the most recent blog, Nevada Slot Machine Casino Gambling. Links to these daily reports, along with their release schedule, can be found at professorslots.com/state. I'm writing each blog in alphabetical order, with the expectation of completing the first rendition of the series by mid-2018. As you already know, I have been incorporating these reports into this weekly podcast. In a few moments, for example, I'll be reviewing slot machine casino gambling in the U.S. territory of Guam. Because of the currently dynamic nature of the gaming industry, with its many changes over the last decade, I plan to update each of these reports in an ongoing manner every 56 weeks, which is about 13 months after each report was previously published. Frankly, there's enough happening lately that such an online resource needs to be updated yearly. Sometimes, if they choose to do so, these state gaming regulations include a requirement for publishing monthly statistics for payout return percentages for slot machines and table games. Sometimes they only provide an overall payout return percentage for each casino. Others, like Colorado and Mississippi, offer overall payout return percentages for each casino as well as for each denomination slot machine within that casino. Today's first of 2 pro tips is a suggestion to visit the State Gaming Commission or Control Board of the gaming jurisdiction or jurisdictions in which you gamble. For example, it's a great location to find out about license approvals for new casinos not far from you, well before groundbreaking takes place. Or what is the current gaming industry debates that are going on within the state? Finally, and I consider this the most important aspect for supporting my audience of slot enthusiasts, it's where any available payout return statistics can be found. Remember to visit ProfessorSlots.com/subscribe to get my free report revealing the top 7 online resources for improving your gambling performance, including the one I've used as a top-tier slot machine casino gambler. Show notes for this episode are now available within most podcast apps, but are also available on my website at ProfessorSlots.com/E14. Up next is the second segment of the show, Guam Slot Machine Casino Gambling. In this episode segment, I provide a brief overview of the current state of gambling in a U.S. state, U.S. territory, or U.S. federal district. While I'll present some aspects of the overall gambling situation within that specific U.S. state, territory, or federal district, my emphasis by far will be focused on anything of interest to slot machine casino gamblers. Each state-by-state episode segment can be expected to include an introduction, relevant legal statutes on gambling, if any, slot machine private ownership, state gaming commission, if any, gambling establishments, if any, and a summary. My introduction for Guam slots pretty much tells you everything you need to know about the availability of slot machines in the U.S. territory of Guam. Here goes. Guam slot machine casino gambling is not available on this unincorporated U.S. island territory situated in Micronesia in the Western Pacific. That having been said, I'll explain a bit more about Guam so you can best understand if this non-gambling situation might possibly change. Guam consists of 210 square miles of land with 162,472 residents as of 2017. Its most populous city is Didio. Its capital is Hagnatha. I'm certain I'm not pronouncing either of these names at all correctly, for which I apologize. Guam is the largest and southernmost of the Mariana Islands and the largest island in Micronesia. Since the 1960s, Guam's economy, relatively stable since 2000, has been supported by tourism and the United States Armed Forces. Guam is a popular tourist destination, with 90% being Japanese. Flight time from Japan is about 3 hours. The remaining tourists arrive from South Korea, the United States, the Philippines, and Taiwan. The city of Tumon is the hub of Guam tourism, having over 20 large hotels, duty-free shopping, a pleasure island district, an indoor aquarium, sand castle Vegas-style shows, and other shopping and entertainment venues. To give you an idea of the amount of tourism in this U.S. territory, Guam's 7 golf courses accommodate over 1 million tourists per year. The inhabitants of Guam are called Guananamans and are American citizens by birth. Indigenous Guananamans are Chamaros. With regard to the relevant legal statutes, most forms of gambling are illegal in Guam, including casinos and slot machines. Gambling is deemed illegal by the Criminal and Correctional Code from 1977. Betting on greyhound racing, however, is allowed. Guam's Criminal and Correctional Code contains Chapter 64, Gambling, under the Supreme Court of Guam's compiler of laws. This 17-page document is available at ProfessorSlots.com/Guam, where Guam is spelled G-U-A-M. The document has 2 sections called Articles, where Article 1 is Gambling generally, and Article 2 is Authorized Activities. Article 1 has Section 64.23 called Slot Machines, which begins on page 10. It begins with quite a clear statement. No section of this Act shall be construed to allow the operation of slot machines in the territory of Guam. That pretty much says it all. Article 2, as mentioned, is about authorized activities. Non-repealed sections include social gambling defined and permitted, legal cockfight gambling permitted, amusement devices, and permit procedure for organizations authorized to conduct gambling. While my podcast is for slots enthusiasts, I have to imagine we're all a little bit interested in that second section, legal cockfight gambling. While most forms of gambling are illegal in Guam, apparently legal cockfight gambling is permitted in a licensed cockpit where all the wagerers are present and 18 years of age or older. Owners of the property with an active, non-licensed cockpit are fined $500 for the first offense, with the second and subsequent offenses being a fine of $2,000 each. Next up is a usually short statement about slot machine private ownership, which I have included in case you live in this U.S. territory and are considering owning a slot machine. Here it is. The possession of gambling devices is illegal in Guam, regardless of whether or not the devices are operational. Having a gaming commission is key to legalizing gambling within a gaming jurisdiction. So, let's consider previous attempts to establish legalized gambling in Guam, along with their consequences. Keep in mind that we already know the result. Most forms of gambling is illegal, except cockfighting and licensed cockpits, of course. In 1996, voters were asked to decide whether or not to legalize casino gambling in the island. Voters defeated it by an almost 3-to-1 margin. In November 2004, voters were again asked to decide. The 2004 initiative would have restricted casinos to hotels with more than 100 rooms. The proposal was voted down by a wide margin, primarily supported by the Catholic Church and assorted Guam business leaders. Further, in June of 2006, Governor Felix Camacho reversed a decision to allow casino gambling during the yearly Liberation Day Carnival, commemorating the liberation of the island from the Japanese during World War II. Several additional attempts have since been made to legalize gambling on Guam, primarily focused on installing slot machines at the Guam Greyhound track. All such proposals have so far been defeated by voters. In November of 2008, the Guam Greyhound track closed after 32 years of operation. While I reviewed this closing, I discovered that the 150 greyhounds owned by the Guam Greyhound Park were freely given away to anyone who came to the track on the island territory, which created something of an uproar on both the island as well as internationally. Essentially, the greyhounds were neither spayed nor neutered. No record was kept who got the greyhounds, and no legal transfer was made. Many people believed the dogs would make good guard dogs. Others took them in an attempt to breed fighting dogs. It didn't take long for the greyhounds to show up stray or in very bad circumstances. However, the National Greyhound Adoption Program soon became involved. Beginning in 2009, each week, greyhounds took the long flight from Guam to Hawaii and then Los Angeles, California. From there, the dogs were distributed to adoption programs across the West Coast. In this next section, I'll discuss Guam gambling establishments. Most forms of gambling are illegal in Guam. However, game rooms and Pekino parlors can be found, but are not classified as gambling under Guam legal statutes. Also, despite the conclusion of the annual Liberation Carnival in August of 2016, the Mayor's Council of Guam has continued to use the casino building at the tie-in carnival grounds for gambling events, using the name of Village Fiestas as recently as March 24, 2017. This is an excellent example of an ongoing issue for many gaming commissions. Legal statutes are important, but enforcement of those legal statutes also requires a structure or regulatory framework for both law and enforcement to work well together. In summary, Guam slot machine casino gambling doesn't exist. Guam is situated in Micronesia in the Western Pacific. Most forms of gambling are illegal, including Guam slot machine casino gambling. Some game rooms, Pekino parlors, and legal cockfights are either permitted or not recognized by Guam legal statutes as gambling. Guam is a popular tourist destination, welcoming 1.53 million visitors in 2016. Betting on greyhound racing is allowed. However, in November of 2008, the Guam Greyhound track closed after 32 years of operation. Remember to visit ProfessorSlots.com/subscribe to get my free report revealing the top 7 online resources for improving your gambling performance, including the one I've used as a top-tier slot machine casino gambler. Up next is the third segment of the show, a casino trip report. Due to personal time constraints and blizzard-like conditions over Christmas, I was unable to visit a casino during this major U.S. holiday, as I'd planned to for you. This situation does remind me about staying safe while gambling. Some of us have spent hours at a casino and are not always aware if the weather situation has taken a turn for the worst. I've been at a casino at such a time, arriving there before the weather turned bad and then not being aware of just how bad it had gotten outside. This leads me to providing you with this episode's second pro tip. Pro tip number 2. If you are at a casino when severe weather strikes, consider asking the casino for complimentary room accommodations rather than potentially risking your life by leaving the casino. I've been surprised by nasty weather after spending hours at a casino, not being aware that the weather had taken a turn for the worst, until casino floor managers began approaching the few remaining patrons in the casino, including myself, with offers of a free room for safety's sake. This pro tip is, consider staying the night at a casino's hotel or associated hotel, if caught there during severe weather conditions. Next up is a 5-star review provided by TTNPT00 from the U.S. version of iTunes on December 22nd, 2017. Its title is, "My Eyes Have Been Opened to a Whole New World of Slot Play." Quote, "Learning to identify candidate slot machines that match my payroll has allowed me to play longer and leave ahead more often than not. The last 6 visits, I've cleared 30% on average versus negative 10% the 4 visits prior to discovering the podcast. Thank you so much, Tao." Thank you, Tao. If you'd like to provide a rating and review for this podcast, which may well help other slot enthusiasts decide to take a listen to one or more of my episodes, simply use your podcast app. Visit ProfessorSlots.com/Apple Podcasts if you're an Apple device user, or visit ProfessorSlots.com/Android for Android users. I'd like to take a moment to welcome new listeners to the show, thanks to other gambling podcasts I've been on or otherwise interviewed by. First, thanks to Elsie Escobar for approving my submission for a Rockin' Libsyn podcast for the Professor Slots podcast on her Libsyn blog. For those that don't know, podcasts require a host, and Liberated Syndications is one of the best. It's where this podcast is hosted. And Elsie promotes podcasts on her website and podcast show. Visit her blog about Professor Slots at ProfessorSlots.com/interview1. Second, thanks to Derek Oliver from High Roller Radio in Toronto for the 20-minute interview from mid-December. Those interested can find this interview on YouTube by visiting ProfessorSlots.com/interview2. Third, I was most recently on the gambling podcast You Can Bet on That on episode 143 from December 21st, 2017. Their show notes webpage and the audio for their episode 143 can most easily be found at ProfessorSlots.com/interview3. Thanks to Mark and Dr. Mike from You Can Bet on That for your warm welcome to the gambling podcast community, as well as your interest in my podcast on slot machine casino gambling for slots enthusiasts. You guys are great, and those interested in every type of gambling should take a listen to their You Can Bet on That podcast for the entertainment gambler. I have a few more interviews lined up for after the new year, but I'll wait to tell you more about where to find them until they've actually been released. Part 1 of the next episode of the Professor Slots podcast is What to Expect from Professor Slots in 2018. Part 2 of the next episode of the Professor Slots podcast is another brief overview of the current state of gambling in a U.S. state, territory, or federal district. This time, I'll be talking to you about the U.S. state of Hawaii, another popular tourist destination. Part 3 of the next episode of the Professor Slots podcast is another visit to a casino. That's the end of another great episode of the Professor Slots podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Show notes for this episode can be found within most podcast apps or at ProfessorSlots.com/E14. I plan to have the next episode come out very soon for you, where I'll have more amazing content for the show. Please subscribe to and review the show. That would help so much. To do so, simply use your podcast app, Visit ProfessorSlots.com/Apple Podcast if you're an Apple device user, or visit ProfessorSlots.com/Android for Android users. I hope everyone has a great New Year's Eve and a wonderful New Year. Stay safe. Until the next episode, have fun, be safe, and make good choices. Bye.